part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Alongside me is Jordan Powell, producer extraordinaire. And Jordan and I are coming to you on a Monday afternoon, largely because we wanted to let Sunday's disaster in Foxborough settle. And we wanted to see, okay, let the emotions kind of chill a bit, and let's see what happens from there. Well, I'm just as upset on Monday afternoon as I was on Sunday afternoon. Such is life when the Cleveland Browns go to Foxborough to face Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots and get beat 45-7. Belichick and company spotted the Browns 7 points and then ripped off 45 in a row. I mean, you laugh because you don't have any other choice. You either laugh or you cry. This was an unmitigated disaster from basically the moment. I would say the moment they got off the plane, but the seeds were sown before that, obviously, because of the lack of preparation, the lack of ingenuity, of creativity, the lack of a game plan to really challenge Patriots head coach Bill Belichick and OC Josh McDaniels. The Patriots get better competition, better resistance in practice than they did against the Browns on Sunday. And New England rolled to its fourth consecutive victory. It's now 6-4. Cleveland slipped to 5-5. So that's right. Both teams at the start of the game were 5-4. Supposedly, in the NFL, you are what your record says you are, and both those teams were even at 5-4. But we learned that one of them played like it was 1-8, and the other one played like it was 8-1. And where to begin with this mess, with this monstrosity? Well, I do want to throw out what I found to be one of the more fascinating stats of the year. The blowout was so decisive that Belichick and McDaniels were able to sub in Cleveland's own Brian Hoyer for starting quarterback Mac Jones. And Hoyer took over for a possession when the Patriots were leading 38-7. And Hoyer, the destroyer, proceeded to help the Patriots go down the field and score. I believe that was their third and final possession of 90-plus yards. And Hoyer went 3 for 3 for 85 yards in the possession, including a touchdown pass. Those 85 passing yards by Brian Hoyer in 3 attempts were more than either Brown's starting quarterback Baker Mayfield or backup Case Keenum. Mayfield 11 of 21 for 73 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Keenum 8 of 12 for 81 yards, no TDs, no picks. Brian Hoyer in 3 passes had more yards through the air than Baker Mayfield or Case Keenum. If that doesn't sum up this disaster, I don't know what does. And oddly enough, it started well for the Browns. We mentioned the Patriots spotting them 7 points. They spotted them 7 right out of the gate. Belichick won the toss, deferred as he typically does. Browns got the ball, went right down the field, and scored. And converted a 4th down to get the touchdown. 4th and goal at the 2. Mayfield to Austin Hooper for the TD pass. So things are looking good for the Browns, and they're feeling it, and they're in Foxborough, and they're ready to show the GOAT of coaches, one of the all-time greatest anyway, Bill Belichick, hey, this is the Browns in 2020, and we're here, and we're on a roll. We're ready to roll, continue through November, and we're coming off a big win over the Bengals. Oh, yeah, okay. Patriots answered with a 15-play, 83-yard possession in 9:39. Touchdown. 7-7. That was essentially the ball game. When the Patriots answered the Browns' opening score with one of their own and did it in 15 plays, 83 yards, I think converted 3 third downs along the way. That was your ball game right there. And for the rest of the way, it was an unmitigated disaster. This for Cleveland. Second possession, interception by the Bake Show. Might as well have been a pick six because it was a one-play possession for New England. 5 yards, touchdown, 14-7, and the route was on. By the way, the Hoyer touchdown possession was 6 plays for 95 yards in 4:02. That made it 45-7. Excluding the kneel down at the end of the game for New England, the Patriots had 6 touchdown possessions, or 6 possessions that resulted in a touchdown, 1 that resulted in a field goal, and 1 that resulted in a punt. 1 punt for the Patriots the entire game. That's how disastrous it was for Cleveland. I keep using the D word because that is the first one that comes to mind. As well as a lot of stuff that begins with DIS. Disgusting, disaster, discombobulated, disheveled. The Cleveland Browns it was amateur hour. And on my radio show on Sunday afternoon on News Radio WTM 1100 and 106.9 FM, I played Benny Hill's Yakety Sax because that's what the Browns essentially performed to. They were clowns out there. They got clowned. They got professionally clowned by Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels. And they should be embarrassed. I said this on the radio show. I've said it many times. I've even said it on this podcast before. The reason I said should be embarrassed because professional athletes don't typically get embarrassed. Maybe publicly they'll claim that they do, but privately they're looking at their bank accounts and going, wait a minute, why should we be embarrassed? And in the case of NFL players, we're making millions of dollars and we get treated like kings. We get we have generational wealth. Okay, so we got beat really badly in a football game. All right, so what? My bank account doesn't reflect that. And it's not just football. It's typically pro sports athletes don't get embarrassed, at least privately, because of the wealth that they've accrued. But here's a case where I really hope that even with all the money the Browns have made, with their contracts, each individual player, I hope that they just look in the mirror and go, this is a disgrace. This cannot stand. This is something, you talk about professional pride. You cannot be overrun like that in a mismatch of that kind of magnitude and think that everything's okay and just because I got bank, I'm good. No, that shouldn't be the case. I hope it's not the case. The Browns were so bad that the game was over by halftime. 24-7, the Patriots led. And that's when I said the unofficial garbage time clock began. Officially, garbage time occurred by 5:04 left in the third quarter when the Patriots led 31-7. And, it was just a matter of, okay, How are the Browns going to get out of here? How are they going to look when they know they're being destroyed? And quite honestly, that look wasn't good either. On the way to destruction wasn't bad. And as you're in the middle of it and you know it's a finality, that didn't look good either. The body language, the business decisions, what appeared to be business decisions. Because I would never call an individual NFL player the Q word. I would never call an individual NFL player a quitter. I'm just going to say the collective body language of the Cleveland Browns in the second half against New England did not look good at all and did not reflect well on the organization. And one of the thoughts that was coursing through my veins, my angry veins, was here we go again for the second time in 3 years, in fact, where the Browns were overhyped. The hype machine was in overdrive this past offseason. And what has it gotten? The Cleveland Browns, 5-5. The embodiment of mediocrity. I take you back to pre-2019. Freddie Kitchens hired as the coach, full-time, head coach. He's the man. It's his first time as an NFL head coach. And Browns are going to roll because Freddie and Baker are on the same page, and their offense makes sweet music. And here we go, opening game of the season. Oh, Tennessee will just be a speed bump. No, the Tennessee Titans smoked the Browns. And quite honestly, they were never the same that season. Admittedly, though, they did go to Baltimore and win to go to 2-2, but the seed was sown for a problematic season in the opener at home against Tennessee. Browns wound up going 6-10, and Freddie Kitchens was fired. That was his one and only season with the Browns as head coach. So after that season, I said, never again. I'm not buying the hype. I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe where Cleveland's concerned. And of course, I did this past off season. I kept hearing and watching all this talent that was accumulated. And I was hearing not just local, but national analysts. Oh my gosh, you cannot believe how good this roster is. This is a Super Bowl worthy team right here. And they're going to take the next step after going 11-5 and winning a playoff game last year. They're the ascending team in the AFC. They might very well be the team to beat. Forget about Kansas City. They've only been to the last 2 Super Bowls and won one of them. The Browns are the team. Okay, so I was like, yeah, I'm in. I will say, though, that I didn't quite believe that the Browns had as much talent as everybody was telling me they did. As Pro Football Focus might have been telling me that they did. And not to pick on Pro Football Focus, but we know they're a very important part of the Cleveland Browns operation. Regardless, I went along with it. I said, okay, this team has a lot of talent. Let's see what happens. And what we've seen is that injuries wreak havoc on seasons, no question about it. But that can't be the excuse for Cleveland. Cleveland's had a lot of injuries, no doubt about it. But that can't be the excuse. Every team deals with injuries. I know not every team deals with injuries to its number one, its QB1. Baker Mayfield, torn up left shoulder, fractured left shoulder, ankle issue, had a knee that knocked him out of the game against the Patriots. That's why Keenum came in. Mayfield wasn't benched. It was just that he could barely put any pressure on his knee after he got hit throwing the ball. So yeah, the Browns have had injuries, and against the Patriots, they didn't have Nick Chubb because of COVID. Not injuries, but COVID protocols. Their running back room was razor thin. It was down to essentially Dearness Johnson. I get all that. I get the NFL stands for not for long. It's a war of attrition, figurative war of attrition. But, I mean, that can't explain everything. It can't. And You're never going to be perfectly healthy in this league. I don't care what team you are. You have to win despite injuries, despite guys going down. And in this era that we're in now, despite COVID. That is only an explanation for so long. Then you have to start looking at some of the systemic stuff. And you have to say, okay, what about the job the front office did? Are these players actually as good as we think? Is the coaching staff maximizing the talent on the roster? Does the coaching staff have a plan offensively, defensively, and for that matter, special teams wise, that keeps the other team's coaches up at night or makes them fret a little bit? And unfortunately, we're getting answers to those questions that aren't good ones. And when we return on the other side of the upcoming break, I am going to tell you what I would do if I were Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Jeremy Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need each week to get you ready for kickoff and beyond.
Don't miss our breakdowns of each week's matchups, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we all know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
That's right, Jeremy. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of The Orange is Oranger Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it, Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And I'm Gary, and we love ball cards.
And if you love ball cards too, good news. You just found your new favorite podcast. From breaks to grading.
And from collecting to flipping, join us on the Ball Card Show.
The sports podcast for the sports collector.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Hello, this is Don Mike Mendoza, the host of the Producing While Asian podcast. Join us to listen in on conversations with everyone who identify from producers to non-producers who all are part of the AAPI community. There's all that and more on the Producing While Asian podcast here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
This is Mike Voorhees, co-host of the Swing and a Tribe MLB podcast. If you love Cleveland Indians baseball, then this is the pod for you. We've got you covered each week as we talk about all the games, breaking news, trades, the roster, all things Tribe. You're going to love it. Go Tribe.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Producer extraordinaire Jordan Powell and I come to you on a, Monday afternoon, the day after the Browns' humiliation at the hands of Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels and company, 45-7. the Patriots were fueled by Mac Jones, the quarterback, who was the number 15 overall pick in the 2021 draft. All Mac Jones did was just carve the Browns, and they really had no answer for him, nor did they have an answer for the running back Stevenson out of Oklahoma, who was the 4th-round pick of the Patriots in 2021. So the Browns got stung by the 2021 NFL draft. And the 2nd-round pick in that draft, Christian Barmore out of Alabama, the defensive tackle, he was really good yesterday, I thought. I don't know what PFF is going to say, but I thought Barmore played well in the interior of the Patriots D-line. By the way, with McDaniels, we all know the Browns had him in their sights multiple times to be the head coach, including the offseason heading into 2020. They brought him in for a full day, and what happened in the building in Berea at Lou Groza Boulevard has been pretty much, vacuum sealed. But we can take guesses that Josh McDaniels wanted his own crew in terms of the front office, and the Browns were unwilling to do that. I think the Haslam ownership of the Browns liked McDaniels, the coach, but they weren't willing to give him, total autonomy from general manager on down or president of football ops on down. That's my guess. And McDaniels wound up not being hired by the Browns, and they went with Kevin Stefanski, who was a guy that was really liked by Chief Operating Officer Paul DePodesta. And you know what? I mean, Stefanski in his second year, first year was incredible. He took this team, he changed the culture. This was a moribund franchise, a toxic waste dump in the eyes of a lot of national people. Stefanski comes in, takes over for the disorganization that was Freddie Kitchens' era. And he turned it around. 11-5 last season, won a playoff game, lost in the divisional round to the Chiefs. No shame there. So he set the table for a banner 2021 season. However, the expectation level being as high as it was entering this season meant that Stefanski and company didn't have much margin for error. It wasn't going to be acceptable if this team was just plodding along at 500 or, not playing well against quality teams. Well, guess what? Here we are through week 10 of a season of Super Bowl expectations, and the Browns are 5-5. As we said, it doesn't get much more mediocre than that. And in all honesty, when I look at it, they only have, I'll say, 2.5 quality victories out of 7.5 attempts. So they're 2.5 and 5.5. The losses in opportunities to win against quality teams: at Kansas City week 1, at the LA Chargers week 5, home to the Arizona Cardinals week 6, home to the Steelers week 8, and at New England week 10. The wins: at Cincinnati week 9, home to Denver on Thursday night week 7. And then the half goes to the Browns for that victory in Minnesota when they won 14-7. Minnesota won at the LA Chargers yesterday, but they only improved to 4-5. So I'm still in a waiting game to see how the Vikings finish, record-wise. I know they've had close calls. They should be much better than they are. But I want to see a good record at the end of the season before I declare that a quality victory. For now, though, I'll give the Browns a half a point for that. So through 10 weeks to only have 2.5 quality wins is not good. And the fact of the matter is 3 of their victories, well, at least 2. One was against the trash heap known as Houston. The other one was the Chicago Bears. And then the third one, as we said, was Minnesota. The 2 others outside of Cincinnati and Denver. The 3 others. So it just hasn't been a good season to this point for the Cleveland Browns. If they had gone to New England and been competitive, played hard, looked prepared, hung in there, battled, despite not having Nick Chubb, despite not having Kareem Hunt, having lost OBJ for all that matter to the LA Rams. But, having roster depletions, okay. No right tackle, Jack Conklin, banged up quarterback Baker Mayfield. With all that, if they'd have gone to New England, a tough place to play against a hot team that's feeling it, and being competitive, I'm not talking about this right now. I'm not going to say what I'm about to say. But they weren't competitive. They weren't prepared. They were outclassed in every which way imaginable. And therefore, I am going to say, or I am going to be a role player and say, if I were Kevin Stefanski, if I were Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, what would I do? I said this on my radio show yesterday, but what I would have done first, and we're past that time now, is on Monday morning, I would have called everybody on the traveling party into Lou Groza Boulevard at 7 a.m. sharp and said, you better be here at 7, preferably before 7, not a moment, not a minute after 7. I'm not going to tolerate anybody being late to this meeting. And if you are late, I'm going to cut you. Now, again, I don't know exactly what the procedures are with the CBA and, with the players and the owners and how they could do that. But the point being is that I wanted Kevin Stefanski to lay down the law and have an early Monday morning meeting with everybody who traveled to New England. And basically, I wanted him to say a bunch of what I'm about to say, but let's just move it up to, since Monday morning has come and gone. How about Monday night or Tuesday morning? Okay, so I'm Kevin Stefanski and I'm standing in front of that group and I say, you should know by now that what you did on Sunday afternoon in Foxborough, Massachusetts was unacceptable. It's utterly ridiculous. And you should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed, even though you make a lot of money. I'm embarrassed. All of us did a terrible job of playing an NFL game on Sunday. That's number one. Number two, even though I am not a screamer, even though I don't sit there and peel the paint off the walls with my speeches and yell and scream and holler and bark and all that stuff and break clipboards or throw chairs. Don't mistake that for the fact that, don't think that I'm not running hot, because I am. As the head coach of this team, I am livid. It's been gnawing at me from the moment, we got trucked. Basically, so halftime of the game in New England, I have been furious. And so don't mistake my not being overtly angry with the fact that I'm furious. And with that in mind, there are going to be changes that we need to make if we want to save the season. And by the way, we can save this season. Believe it or not, as bad as we were Sunday, as mediocre as 5-5 is, as crowded as the AFC playoff picture is beyond the divisions, we can save this season. And the way I look at it, I know there's only 7 games left, but I'll even reduce it as your head coach to a 3-game run, starting with Detroit at home on Sunday, then at Baltimore, then a bye, then Baltimore again, this time in Cleveland. That 3-game in 4-week stretch can save our season. And I know that 3-0 in that stretch doesn't seem realistic to a lot of people on the outside. But I believe that even as mad as I am at you guys for how you played in New England and how mediocre we've been to this point, and I'm mad at myself and my staff and everybody else, everybody in this room, I still think we can rip off 3 wins in a row, and all of a sudden we are right there in the AFC North. That's the path to get in, is win the North. I don't want to, test us out of the wild card waters. The way to get in is to win the division. And the way to win the division is to sweep the Ravens after beating the Lions. By the way, we're not taking the Lions for granted because we're not in a position to take anybody for granted. So the plan is we are going to prepare like we've never prepared before. We are going to work as hard as we've ever worked this week to beat the Lions, next week to win at Baltimore, and then 2 weeks after that to win in Cleveland over Baltimore. We are going to have attention to detail like we've never had. We will have everybody ready to play after really, really, really good weeks of practice. Whoever's available to us, no excuses. And if you think that I haven't done some introspection about what I can do better as head coach of the Browns, well, you're wrong, because I have. And I've decided to make 2 significant changes to how we do things. Number 1, on the offensive side, I'm going to offload play calling to Alex Van Pelt. This is not a concession of defeat. This is not me throwing up my hands saying I can't do this. What this is the head coach of the team who has seen leaks being sprung around all parts of the team. I need to be overseeing the operation better, especially on game day. I have to be involved in every nook and cranny of this team on game day. And I haven't been able to do that while calling the plays. And I think we have an incredibly capable offensive mind in Alex Van Pelt. And he has the right to call plays. He is a guy I trust. And he knows, too, that the head coach is the boss, and I have the opportunity to overrule any of his calls. I can call what I want on 3rd down if I don't quite like what Alex is going to call. I don't plan on doing that because I have faith in him, but I'll do it if necessary. So Alex Van Pelt is going to be calling the plays as I make this change. Of course, I'm going to be involved in the game planning and constructing the offense with Bill Callahan and Alex and everything else. But on game day, it's Alex Van Pelt's show, and I'll be there to assist or tweak if need be. On the defensive side, I'm retaining Joe Woods as defensive coordinator. I hired him. I like him. I think he's been dealt an unfair hand in certain situations. But, Joe, you're in the room. I'm not happy with you, like I'm not happy with a lot of people, including me. Again, I'm not happy with myself. So I'm going to tell you this, straight up in the room here. I'm not doing none of this backbiting or anything going behind the scenes to take it. No, we're all in this together. We've all been substandard. We're all to blame. Joe, you need to be better. And one of the ways that I want you to be better as the head coach is I want you to put more pressure on the quarterback. And I know it's not necessarily in your DNA as a DC and how you do things, but I watched the tape of the Miami Dolphins on the previous Thursday night against the Baltimore Ravens, and I saw what the Dolphins were doing at the line of scrimmage on D with the walk-up pressure, and they had 6, 7, 8 guys sometimes dropping guys into coverage. They were standing around. You didn't know who was going to come from where. And it clearly rattled Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. I want some of that. I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to be successful, but I'll tell you this. If we're going to go down this season, we are going to go down with max pressure on the quarterback, period. I know we have capable D linemen. I get that. We have a sack master in Myles Garrett. We have a former number 1 overall pick in Jadeveon Clowney. We have the Maliks in the middle. Okay, you can show me data that our 4-man rush puts pressure on the quarterback, but I want more pressure on the quarterback. I want that quarterback to feel, and I know I'm evoking something that, you might scoff at, but the 85 Bears, I want that type of pressure. Nobody will ever be able to match the 85 Bears in terms of the way the 46 defense wreaked havoc on quarterbacks and O-lines. But I want something out of the 46 mold that you saw the defensive coaches and the Miami Dolphins players play against the Baltimore Ravens last Thursday. We are not going to sit back and just bank on our 4-man rush, especially against Lamar Jackson. We're going to try to duplicate what the Dolphins do, what they did. And until and unless they beat us with it, until Jackson's clearly solved that riddle, we're going to keep doing it. And the dress rehearsal for it is going to be Detroit. And by the way, when I say dress rehearsal, I'm not demeaning the Lions. I'm simply saying that this is the first game where we're really going to test it. And we are going to bring max pressure as many times as we possibly can, beginning this week in preparation for the Lions. Those are my 2 significant changes that I'm proposing that I make, both directly and indirectly involving me, to help us get out of this rut. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And I'll see you in a couple of hours or whatever at the next meeting. All right, that's the end of my role play as Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski. And so I'm officially out of Kevin Stefanski's skin. And you notice I didn't scream. I didn't swear. You can't see this, but I didn't spit. I wasn't throwing things. I don't expect Kevin Stefanski to get out of his skin, but I do expect him to look at the situation and say, you know what? The status quo is not cutting it. Just saying we need to be better is not cutting it. Because the one thing that really bothers me when I hear coaches and players after games in which they've been beaten badly is this. Well, we've got correctable errors. We'll look at the film and, or the DVR or the iPad, whatever it is. And we got errors we know how to fix. We got penalties that we know we can fix. And these are correctable mistakes. I'll stop with that crap. I mean, you could sit there and look at the Browns. Well, if Baker doesn't throw a pick here, or if this block is made, or if this ball isn't dropped, or if this guy doesn't do that, what? I mean, what? The reason you didn't do that stuff, or the reason you committed the turnovers, is because you're not very good. So I don't think you can sit there and rely on, well, we're just going to fix what we find as the correctable mistakes after watching the film. This team at this time needs to make, if not sweeping changes, considerable tweaks, let's say, something short of a sweeping change, but there needs to be a different approach to how the Browns prepare and how they play on Sunday. It can't just be, well, we're going to fix what ails us from the previous week and we'll be back at them ready to go next week. No. That's what the New England loss did, was it exposed the Browns for not having the right preparation going into a game against a good team, a game against a team that is hitting its stride in November when you're supposed to. When you're supposed to be rolling, the Patriots are rolling and the Browns are veering off a cliff. The New England game might very well be a blessing in disguise because it showed the Browns how woefully deficient they were in various areas. There was nothing the Browns threw or ran. I mean, I should say, I'm going to carve out an exception. Dearness Johnson. So 20 carries for 99 yards? No, I got no issues with Dearness Johnson. Pretty much everybody else gets an F in my mind for that performance against the Patriots, but not Dearness. He ran the ball pretty darn well given the circumstance, especially that first possession. The rest of them, it was junk. But there was nothing the Browns did on offense that made Belichick nervous. There's nothing that the Browns did on defense that made McDaniels nervous. And McDaniels was doing it with a couple of rookies and some other guys who aren't, let's say, household names. Most importantly, though, the Patriots are doing it with a physical, fundamentally sound O-line and a physical, fundamentally sound D-line. And we know that Bill Belichick preaches, just do your job. Belichick believes that his systems, his approach to the game, will beat you with plug and play, with a few notable exceptions, specifically quarterback. Even Belichick, as great as he is, knew that he wasn't going to get where he needed to go and win Super Bowls with an average quarterback. He needed Tom Brady, that type of QB. And maybe he thinks he's got that type of QB again in Mac Jones, or at least a quarterback who can ascend to a level that can get him to a Super Bowl. I mean, nobody's going to compare to Tom Brady ultimately, but the point being is that Belichick seems to be thrilled with Mac Jones, and so is Josh McDaniels. But Belichick believes that his offensive philosophies and his defensive philosophies and his special teams philosophies will carry the day with guys that he can move in and out, disposable pieces. I don't think Bill Belichick believes in irreplaceable pieces beyond, as I said, quarterback and maybe one or two other positions over the course of a year. He believes that if you do your job the way you're supposed to, and he's identified you as a guy capable of doing that job, that you don't have to be a superstar and he can win with you. Just look at his running backs. Anytime Belichick has running backs who put up huge numbers, it seems like every time the next year they're gone. Like, they don't stick around very long. Or let's put it this way, if they want to get paid, Belichick's like, nah, I'll pass. Bring me the next no-name running back or the next mid-round draft pick, and I'll turn him into a stud. And then the minute he thinks he's too big for his britches, I'll move on to the next guy. Not to say Belichick doesn't believe in name players, bringing in big name guys. He's done it at every position. But he's more than willing to test his mettle with guys you don't necessarily hear of or that flow off the tongue, because he believes in his coaching acumen and his system so well. Well, those systems expose the Browns, and the Browns need to take that as a punch in the face, but they need to learn from it. That's critical aspect of this. And what worries me is that the Browns paradigm, the Ivy League trifecta of Paul DePodesta at the head of the front office, or alongside Andrew Berry in the front office, and Andrew Berry as well, and then Kevin Stefanski. All three Ivy Leaguers, all three brilliant. No question they're brilliant. I mean, I'm being serious. Like, they're incredibly intelligent people. Unfortunately, at least sometimes, intelligent people can be very, very stubborn because they look and they say, well, you know what? We are smarter than you and we know more than you, so we're going to stick to what got us here, or we're going to stick to our principles expressly because we're so brilliant. We are going to dig in. And we don't panic. Intelligent people don't panic. Intelligent people say, trust us, trust us, trust us. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. And that can work a lot of the time. But in the NFL, when you've been exposed like this, even the smart guys need to say, okay, maybe we need to make some changes. And I'm not talking drastic. I'm not talking fire people. If I'm the Haslam ownership, I don't fire anybody until the end of the season. I let the season play out, because as bad as the Browns looked on Sunday, they're still in it. So I'm not, to me, firing Joe Woods as an example would be a panic move. But while you retain Joe Woods and while you have Alex Van Pelt on your staff, you can make changes midstream that can potentially save your season. And that's where I hope that, normally we say, check your ego at the door, subjugate your ego. In this case, I truly believe that. DePodesta, Berry, and Stefanski need to check their intelligence at the door. I mean, that could be a hindrance here if they don't allow themselves to see the forest for the trees. If they don't allow the Belichick-McDaniels lesson to sink in, and they just say, we're smarter than everybody else or most people, we're going to do it our way. We trust our methods. We trust our brains, and we know what we're doing. I don't doubt that they know what they're doing. But even intelligent people have to tweak along the way. Think about the great Tesla and the great Edison as two examples of brilliant human beings who constantly ran into stone walls when they were inventing things and made mistakes along the way. I had to bring up Tesla and Edison because that battle between those two guys is epic. But DePodesta, Stefanski, and Berry, after the meeting with everybody, all the players in my role play, they need to get together and say, look, we got to tweak some things. Let's go to work. Embrace it. And they need to know, too, that making changes within the walls at Lou Groza Boulevard is not a concession of, they're not a concession of defeat. They're simply saying we need to move. We need to be fluid. We need to evolve as we go. All right. Thank you very much for listening to this particular edition of the Dennis Manoloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. We'll talk to everybody soon.